In Zohran Mamdani's acceptance speech, he said he will prove there's no problem too large for government to solve. Yeah, the dude's a full-on socialist. Okay, how do you have an issue with a man aiming to solve big problems? Because past leaders used to understand this fundamental American belief that government is not the answer to all our problems. In fact, Reagan said government is the problem. Clinton at least acknowledged that government can't solve everything. Remember what JFK said? Ask not what your country can do for you, ask what you can do for your country. What happened to those Democrats? Well, I think a lot of the Democratic Party is still with you and your limited centrist thinking philosophies that have led to the top 1% owning more wealth than the bottom 90%, and one man, Elon Musk, owning more than the bottom 52% of Americans. So cool, government has largely stayed out of people's lives, and now we have massive inequality, leading to 70% of Americans living paycheck to paycheck. Okay, yes, inequality exists, as it has in every society ever. The question is, what is the best mechanism to lift people out of poverty? And I'll tell you this, it ain't the government spending more. The perfect example is actually New York versus Florida. They're about equal populations, similar sized economies, yet New York has the highest top income tax rate in the nation. Florida has no state income tax rate, making New York spend more than 2 times more per capita on its residents. So what is New York getting from that government spending? Well, for one, the unionized rates in New York are much higher. The percent of those uninsured are less than half. Lower infant mortality rate, higher life expectancy. New York has a higher GDP per capita, lower violent crime rate, and much better public schools. But also New York has a much higher cost of living, higher poverty rates, more inequality, more unemployment, more homelessness, less houses being built, more government debt. Florida also ranks higher overall in education. So the more government doesn't seem to be doing much, as people are voting with their feet out of New York to Florida. And Mamdani thinks the answer to New York's problems is even higher taxes and even more government. This feels like a cherry-picked example. If you look at the World Happiness Index, the Nordic countries consistently rank highest because they have what Americans would call scary socialism, which still means a free market system, but higher tax rates, more safety nets, free healthcare and education, a few less billionaires. Wow, how scary. Well, they also have much smaller populations, different cultures, and we subsidize their defense. I prefer comparing American states rather than distant countries. Of course you do. Look, Mamdani will show you that actually the world won't fall apart if the government strives to play a bigger part in solving our country's biggest problems rather than leaving them for the billionaires to solve. I think the case studies on that philosophy have played out for thousands of years. East versus West Berlin, North versus South Korea, the Soviet Union versus the US, and today, Florida versus New York, which will only intensify. How about the Nordic countries compared to America? Just wait, you will see what we're talking about. Can't wait!